may be slightly out on this. This is possible cooperation with how the Jobs Centre work. Now, I may be wrong on this, but as I understand it, that when people are kind of looking for work, they have to go through a much stricter regime than they used to go through. And it seems to me that where you've got people, if you like, who are drug dealing, who aren't working, etc., that I don't know whether that's a factor that could be tied in, where you kind of use the job centre resources to get these people to account for how come they're in that place when they should be looking for work. Yeah.
No, I do see that. That's a good point. I'm going to ask Mr. Sherborne. You haven't said anything yet, but you asked me in advance a question that I'd like to ask.
Yeah, thank you, Gary Sherborne. I've been a resident of Boscombe for 15 years now. I'm also a drug user, Commissioner. I use marijuana for medicinal purposes. And the majority of this meeting, or a big chunk of this meeting, has been talking about drug problems and the consequences of drug problems. My problem is that I'm dependent on criminals and the criminal network for my medicine. And as Inspector Weeks has pointed out, this never-ending battle and this constant debate about drug use and drug legislation. And I just wanted to point out to you that in America at the moment there are 23 states that have introduced legislation that make it permissible for people like myself to be able to obtain marijuana from licensed and controlled establishments. It's proven to have cut down on crime. It's generating revenue for the neighbourhoods that have embraced this concept. Tonight there's 85,000 lads in jail, and 65% of those are there for non-violent drug-related crimes. And I could go on and on and on and give you loads of evidence how the current drugs war has failed. And it's no longer a war on drugs and drug dealers, it's a war on people, everyday people. And I just wanted to ask you, Commissioner, as the most powerful elected representative that the people of Dorset have got, is there any chance that you might break the taboo and step out of the box that we're in and start looking at alternatives to the current status quo? We've got models all around Europe, and I've got a bag full of the paperwork that shows you the legislation that needs to be addressed. There is a way to look at this issue from a different point of view. And I'd like a commitment from you, Commissioner, that you might take the time to introduce all of our community leaders, get them together around the table and have an honest and frank discussion about alternatives to the mess that we're in.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so my answer to that question, Gary asked me that question this morning, and the answer I will give to you is a commitment that yes, I will, because you're right, as well as being the largest elected official in Dorset, my role is that of facilitation. And I am going to facilitate a drug conference in the early start of next year. The reason it will be that long is that I have 3 conferences stacking up, alcohol, child abuse and domestic violence, for the end of this year. So my next conference will be all the key players in Dorset, including people like yourselves, service users if you like, to discuss alternative ways of addressing the cannabis problem. The reason I've made that commitment now, and I refused to make that commitment last year when Peter Reynolds asked me, because the national campaigner for cannabis legislation, as you probably know, lives about a mile from the police headquarters in Dorset. The reason I didn't do that last year was because I felt things were in flux. I thought the government would take the lead. They haven't. I still wait with interest to see what happens in the election. I'm sure one of the 2 parties will change their stance. But what is interesting in the last year for me is that, as you say, 23 states have now legalised it in America. Sweden and Venezuela are in the process or have legalised. And far more importantly for me, 2 chief constables of English police forces have now called for a different approach. And I spoke to my chief constable today, and with her backing, we are going to hold a drug conference in Dorset early next year.
That's fantastic to know. I'd just like to add as well that the chap who's in charge of the prison system has come out publicly to state that the situation is intolerable. So it's a difficult cookie, but I'm glad to see.
Gary, is firstly the police, and when I say the chief constable backing, she knows what I'm doing, but she can't get involved, and even can these police officers here. But what I would say is the police have to enforce the law, and the government decide the law, not us. And secondly, I cannot change national law, but I can lobby for it. And I do recognise that there's a need to change the way we do things. But it isn't as easy or as clear cut as it could be. There are two sides to that coin. I know some people in this room already will be angry to hear what you've said. It's a very emotive subject. It's a very emotive subject for me. One of my close family members, my own son, has cannabis psychosis. And he got that through smoking cannabis.
That's right, that's what happens.
And,
That's what happens.
you know, 5% of the population get cannabis psychosis. So, you know, it's not as clear cut as...
95% don't.
That is, you know, it's,
To get
it's,
things like that, mate.
so it's a difficult one for me, I must say, yes.
Thank you.
I
Emma.
am taking morphine and diazepam.
Can't hear.
Sorry, can you let the lady speak, please?
I'm taking morphine and diazepam given to me by the doctor. And believe me, diazepam and diazepam, morphine and diazepam are much, much more dangerous than making a cake with marijuana, which I very often do. When I can find someone who can actually find me a supply.
You tell
Right.
me.
Criminal.
And well, you know, so I have to make someone a criminal to get something which relieves me, right? And I think we don't have to go to America to be able to live normally.
If you look at the change in the last year in Europe about drug enforcement, it's clearly things are on the move. Things are changing, and that's why I was going to ask.
Because I don't function
why no, I understand.
without morphine. Do you think it's normal? No, it isn't.
No, I understand.
She doesn't have psychosis either by the looks of it.
No, I don't have any.
No, there you go.
Flawed research.
That psychosis would have been hereditary. They would have got that whether they smoked or not.
Oh,
She's
come
using a
No, no, look into your research. Look at your research.
Can I, we've got 2 or 3 councillors here and
You have to speak up a bit, Barry, sorry.
Right, you were saying about begging. Can I ask any